All right, so office hours, April 30th. Let me jump right to the next one. Two hosts. So we got Thomas and me, Mike Peterson. Thomas, you want to introduce yourself? You're the technical person, so you have more important answers than I will. I'm just going to ask.
Oh God, I wouldn't call myself more important. Just a bit deeper the rabbit hole. Yeah, so I'm Thomas Koziewski. I'm a senior software engineer here at Loft, mostly working on vCluster and the commercial offering, vCluster Pro. And I've been here for more than a year already.
I know, it went by quick. I think
Yeah.
we met in Amsterdam.
In
And
Amsterdam.
then now it's been over a year since then.
Feels
Mike
like
Peterson.
yesterday. Yeah.
It does feel like yesterday. It was well. So Amsterdam, not next year, but the year after again, right? Like next year is London, and then Amsterdam again for KubeCon for those going. All right, I'm Mike Peterson, tech marketing. Usually make demos, demo videos, and like kind of POC stuff to show off how to use things, and then also write blogs and do the office hours and stuff and kind of hang out. So let's get started. So our agenda is going to be our intro. We just kind of did that. It was a lot faster than 5 minutes. We're going to get into vCluster 0.20.0 beta, and then we'll have Q&A and outro. But if you have questions, feel free to ask them while we're actually presenting. I think it might take a little longer for the presentation, and then the Q&A might be more like 5 minutes. But like I said, we can answer as we go through. All right. So what's one of the biggest new things with the beta version of vCluster? Like what's one of the things that have had a lot of time put into it is a unified Helm chart. So previously, the unified Helm chart and the vCluster values file, right? So that's kind of the big differences between what was done previously and what's done now. So previously you had the values file was kind of hard to figure out what configuration options and stuff that you could set up. The documentation was kind of all over the place about what you're putting in there between like configurations for ingress or other things. But what are some of the biggest things that you think happened with this update, Thomas, like between the Helm chart and the values file? What would you consider like the biggest thing people are going to notice when they start using it if they've been using it previously?
Yeah, it's definitely going to be the most visible thing when starting with it, because there are breaking changes. Or if you use the older format, there's going to be breaking changes when you try upgrading. That's why there's this new CLI command that is going to help you migrate your 0.19 versions to 0.20. And there's a lot of enhancements to it, because you will get the validation part that's also on the slides, which means that when you plug in a configuration, the CLI and the syncer will basically tell you, hey, you submitted something that is invalid. Maybe you accidentally enabled two distros at the same time. Maybe you try to switch distros. So all of those things will just pop up during validation. And the vCluster itself just gets a little bit smarter and a little bit more safe to operate, so to say. Because previously, as you mentioned, we've had 3 different Helm charts, I think.
Okay, so it's like touching on the first thing, right? Like 3 different Helm charts for 3 different versions of Kubernetes, right? So
yes,
Kate's,
and it's all vCluster. So the question is, what's the difference between vCluster and vCluster K8s or K0s? Well, there wasn't really any difference. It's all Kubernetes. It's all a vCluster, and it's all running on the vCluster control plane. And now it's just unified into one, so that you don't have to sprawl between 3 different charts, updating them, etc. And now you just have one that you can use with different distros.
That makes sense. So if you're managing multiple right now, it's going to go down to 1, and it's just going to be a configuration option in there that you would put like K8s or K3s or K0s, right?
Exactly.
Very cool. So no more juggling multiple charts. I'll actually read some of the slides too. All right, so the conversion support. So you're saying there's a CLI command that'll convert 0.19 to 0.20 values. So what does that look like? They're going to take, so I've got 3 charts. I'm just going to use a CLI to convert it to the new chart. And then I'll still have 3 versions of the chart, right? Like, but I'm not going to have 3 completely different versions. It's 3 versions of the same thing with different values for which version of Kubernetes I'm using. And a couple other things.
Yeah, so for example, what's going to be happening is, let's say you deployed a vCluster chart that deploys the K3s distribution, that will then be taken by the CLI command, and it will read either the values file that you supplied from the older version and transform it into this newer one that also contains the information that you are utilizing a K3s vCluster, or it will basically just spit it out. Or you can also integrate it into your existing workflows, where you can just say, hey, I have this running vCluster, I'll just get the Helm values from the secret, from the Helm secret. Or you can also just do the Helm CLI and then just pipe it into standard in, and we'll also spit out the 0.20 values for you.
And so what's the customizable distribution? So there's gonna be configuration options for Kubernetes itself, like what you're installing, like I guess different backends for like SQLite and different things like that for storing
Yeah,
data.
exactly. So what you will be able to do is you can then, for example, say that control plane that you would like to utilize is K8s, so vanilla Kubernetes. And then we will pull in the images and we will start those binaries as sub-processes. And then you also have the ability to specify whether you want to run Kubernetes with the embedded database, so with SQLite, and then the Kubernetes would connect against this SQLite database instead of an etcd that is deployed in addition. Or you can also have the option of deploying this external etcd and connecting to that from vanilla Kubernetes. So you get the addition that you can now mix and match between your storage backends that you would like the vCluster to utilize, as well as the distribution itself.
And so the external etcd, that's something that would be managed by the administrator, the user, right? Like that's not something like the pro feature or something like that. That's
no, for that there's an embedded etcd feature, but that is in the commercial offer.
Okay, so yeah, so open source, you can manage your own etcd if you want. You can connect this into it. Okay, cool. All right, so that's a lot of information about or a lot of discussion over just like a Helm chart update, which is kind of a simple update. It's just one Helm chart now. There's not 3 of them. Easier to manage configuration options, and then our documentation should help you with figuring out what the values and stuff are.
Yes.
Our docs are continuously getting updated too. We've got someone helping out that's doing an awesome job on updating the docs. So if you notice, we'll get to that, but the docs are completely different than they were in the last version, which could be a little bit confusing if you're used to finding stuff in a specific section. But
also on the topic of the Helm chart, before we go to the next slide, due to the additional validation, we also have a JSON schema generated for the Helm chart and the values, so that if you start editing those values in your editor of choice, be it VS Code, be it Golang, be it NeoVim with a specific plugin, it will immediately give you feedback if the value that you're supplying is valid or invalid. So for example, if we're expecting a Boolean and you're supplying a string, then it will tell you, hey, this should have been a Boolean or this should have been a string. So you also get this nicer integration into your editor when working with vClusters.
Awesome. All right, let me go to the next one. Now we go all the way into basically, so a lot of the stuff is pulling off of the recent blog posts and stuff that we did. So if you want to read more about that too, I'll get the blog post while Thomas is talking here a second, and I'll post it in chat. It kind of goes over each of these sections and adds a little bit more, and then has maybe some links to the docs where these updates happen. All right, so intuitive configuration. So we're talking about the validation, like you were talking about previously. It's going into the IDEs. Stop me at any of these if you want to comment more on it. I'm just going to read through them because we kind of covered some of the stuff. Consolidated configuration. So all configurations are centralized, and the vCluster YAML. This is the new one. Eliminating confusion previously caused by the mix of CLI flags and Helm values. So I guess there's still some unsupported flags. So if you don't have to update yet, but you just want to try it out, maybe try it out somewhere. But if you're using production stuff, maybe wait till obviously it's out of beta, right? And then all the other stuff should be supported, and just watch for releases. But if you want to try it out and try all the new stuff, obviously give it a try. So the CLI vCluster convert config command makes it easy to transition to a new vCluster YAML format. So previously it's values.yaml. What are the benefits of moving from the values.yaml to the vCluster .yaml? Because I think Pro and open source both use the values YAML when you were configuring anyways, right? So it's just kind of making
So from a technical standpoint, there are comparable, because you can also do a Helm install and just apply the vCluster.yaml file, and it will still do the validation and will also still install the vCluster. So effectively what this vCluster.yaml file is the let's call it central source of truth, or central source of configuration that you can utilize to spin up vCluster in whatever kind of manager, let's call that you would like to utilize, be it through the commercial vCluster platform, be it through Helm, be it through cluster API provider, or any other means that you like to deploy your vClusters with. This one central file will be the configuration for it. So it sort of unifies it and centralizes the configuration efforts that you would have to do. So you don't have to set specific flags or read into the help descriptions what each flag is doing.
And I'll bring up the image what the docs and stuff look like after we get to that too, just so we can kind of see what the difference is. Now it looks more like a documentation with configuration files that you're used to, where it's just got it looks more like an API reference, right? The configuration file stuff does now. So it's a little bit better and centralized instead of just spread all over the place trying to figure out what value to add. All right, so we've renamed some fields. So we've updated field names to be more intuitive, making them easier to understand and remember. Do you know some of the fields that got updated, like off the top of your head, or I don't know, you trying to
I would have
familiarize
to
with the
look
old
that
ways?
up.
Okay, yeah, don't worry about that. All right, so new fields updated, reorganized structure. So they're now logically grouped under categories, simplifying navigation and enhancing discoverability. Really. So like this is the doc stuff, right? Like this, and they're also in the same, like think of it as like a spec, like they're in the same like kind of spec stuff that would follow like looks more like what you're used to with like Kubernetes, right? And there are docs. Well, do you want to comment on that or anything? The structure, or just kind
No.
of makes it easier to read, probably for people if they're used to using it.
Yeah, it makes it easier to read, and I would also say it makes it easier to reason about. Because one of the big reorganizations that I remember is when you now start enabling syncers, they're just grouped into fields that's called to host or from host, or to host or from virtual, something like that, which just makes it much more expressive of where and how those syncers are going to move things between or synchronize them, which is easier than before, where you had to know the name and what it's doing specifically.
What does this mean for the plugins YAML? Like, is all that moving into the vCluster YAML, or you still have like plugins outside, or is that kind of going away with syncing being the general syncer being different in the future?
No, you can still utilize plugins. That
Okay.
isn't breaking the compatibility. And they're also still working. So whenever the vCluster is going to perform any kind of operations, that will still go to a plugin. And then the plugin can do what a plugin does, and modify it or do side effects or create new structs or synchronize structs their ways. So that still works, and you can still configure plugins utilizing that.
But some of that's coming into the vCluster YAML too, like you're saying, from and to host. Like that's what I was normally seeing, like in the plugin file. So that's going to be like
Yes,
maybe
yes,
just for
yes,
the built-in Kubernetes stuff like ingress and things that aren't special or external of what we actually show that we sync, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Okay,
that still works.
All right, so docs are realigned. So documentation now mirrors the structure of vCluster YAML. I'll bring that up after we kind of get through the slides to show what it looks like. It's just, like I said, it looks like an API reference or something like that now, instead of just being like kind of all over the place. All right, so let's go to the next slide. And if there's any questions, like I said, ask us while we're in here. We have Q&A at the end, but if you have questions on what we're talking about, or you want Thomas to expand on something, let us know. So existing vCluster users, what does this mean for you? It means there's a command in the vCluster CLI to help existing users transition to the new format. So it's going to convert, I guess, your values.yaml into the updated version 0.20 vCluster.yaml. So it should be easy to do that. Like I said, maybe don't go to production with it yet, but start testing with it if you're wanting to move to the new version and try it out, and then just try the conversion command and then just like run that and see how that works. See if there's anything.
Yeah. Also on that topic, it's not worse code compared to the previous version, because it's a configuration change. So it's still going to be the same syncers. It's still going to behave the same way as it previously. The only change is how you configure this behavior.
Try and make it more user friendly, because previously it was just kind of like we were it was built in the beginning, and then it was probably just added to for a while until it's like, wait a minute, let's make this a little bit easier now that it's getting
basically
super complicated when it comes to syncing and stuff. All right, so default distro is now K8s. So it was K3S, so now it's K8s, vanilla, right? And the reason for that is it's the least opinionated option, greater flexibility and compatibility. Do you want to expand on this beyond me just reading some of our blog post information?
I mean, I could. The question is how technical I should go.
As much as you want.
How do you want?
Like why K8s over K3S? Like why? So do you have an opinion of why we had K3S to begin with and it wasn't always K8s that was the default, and then why we've moved to it?
Oh yeah, no. So why we started, because it was much easier. The advantage of K3S is basically just have one binary, and that thing puts out a SQLite file, and it just works, which is great. But now with how we are running the distros under the hood, which means as sub processes and everything is in one container and everything can interconnect with each other. This advantage of having all of those things bundled into a single binary that we execute isn't that convincing or that nice anymore. And you get the dependency onto the K3S release cycle, which is a little bit behind the Kubernetes one. So you effectively cannot use the newest and shiniest Kubernetes releases because it's not built into K3S yet, because Rancher still has to do a lot of works to put to put all of the dependencies that they need for the API server, for the schedulers, etc., the different library versions that exist into compatibility layers, into forks and what's not, and then come up with the single binary. And with the vanilla Kubernetes implementation, it's the code straight from the source, right? So when there's 130, you can just start using 130, and there's nothing stopping you from doing that in your vCluster as well as on your host cluster. So it is less opinionated in that sense than, let's say, K3s or K0s, which are also adding their things on top, and maybe even their own authorization concepts with specific tokens and what's not, like bootstrap tokens. But you're basically keeping it to vanilla Kubernetes, to what is the standard, and you can use any tool that it basically builds on top of the Kubernetes API. So you get the advantage of least opinionated, greater flexibility, and it will work with anything that works with a standard Kubernetes API.
Did some of the work that went into like Pro kind of make it back into the open source side too, like where you can select different backends and stuff like that, where you kind of like put it into the configuration, or is this like new for everything? So this will work for like the Pro stuff too. So this is kind of coming from the open source, and then we'll migrate into Pro.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
It never was really a pro feature, at least with the
Okay.
last point that is referring to the embedded and to the embedded database feature that we have mentioned here. It is more a feature that we have implemented that is comparable to what K3s did.
Okay.
Because what K3s did under the hood is they implemented a shim that basically told the Kubernetes API, hey, I'm an etcd and you can do etcd things with me, but they were just putting it into SQLite, Postgres, MySQL, etc. And that's basically the same here. We just ported this into the vCluster layer, compatibility layer, and whenever we spin that up, it just connects. So the Kubernetes user can just connect that and also output a SQLite file. So it's more of a pulling this one specific thing that we really liked about K3s and how K3s was doing things into the default Kubernetes distro, and now coming up with something that we like even more than vanilla K3s.
That's pretty cool. So it's not the embedded, but it is. You can select different things and point to them if you want to. Does it make it easier for like HA maybe now? Like, is it now you're using K8s instead of K3s?
Yeah, yes. So what you can do now is you can use a storage backend, like let's say a Postgres or a MySQL or any other databases supported by Kine. So you could also just spin up a database in, let's say, RDS, and just point your vCluster against that, and all of your state will be persisted in Postgres and can be backed up automatically, and you can have all sorts of SLAs applied and high availability, and then your vClusters can just move around from node to node, spinning up and down, and your state will always be persisted and your workloads will always be running. So it makes it easier in that sense that you can utilize those storage backends now.
Awesome. I don't think we have any questions. So let's go to embedded SQLite, which we kind of expanded on, or you already expanded on before, but we'll see if there's any information you want to comment on from this one too, or if anyone has any questions. So it's now the embedded SQLite is now the default backend for Kubernetes or K8 distro to simplify operations and enhance performance. Offers a more lightweight solution for data storage without overhead, so like etcd, more straightforward. So like I guess when am I going to use, or like when am I going to be happy about using SQLite as the backend instead of like etcd? Is that just going to be for like if I'm doing non-HA and it's more ephemeral, or like what kind of benefit is this to users compared to like what we're doing before?
Yeah, so the advantage is that everything can be self-contained. So when you launch a vCluster, it just has the SQLite file and it can run on its own. You don't need to spin up an additional database. You don't need to take care of that. You can have the SQLite file on a PVC, for example, and you can just back up the PVC, and then if you restore it, it's just there and it's working again. So it is less maintenance that you need to do right from the bat, and you can just spin up a vCluster and everything just works. Famous last words, but it just works. It should work. Let's call it like that. So for users with larger deployments, you probably still want to have like an external etcd or some other database, because you can hit higher loads that this embedded SQLite might not be able to handle, especially when you, for example, would like to use network file storage. That's not a good idea with SQLite, because there's a lot of file locking happening, and network file storages are a little bit slow when it comes to file locking operations, so you will then have issues with it. So there's a couple of caveats when it comes to this SQLite thing in general. But when you just get started with it, when you just want to spin something out, let's say ephemeral environments, running testing, or just giving it to a developer for 5 hours to test something and then just destroy everything, SQLite is probably the most straightforward way of doing it.
That's awesome. All right, so faster. Okay, so the point we're at right now is new vCluster YAML file, new Helm chart. So these are just configuration options now.
Yes.
Right. So it's configuration option in the same Helm chart instead of having to go to like K3S and maybe configure a different backend. Now it's just in the same one and it's an option. So you just select what you want. And the default, like I said, is embedded SQLite. And then you look at the docs and there's like, I think we showed 3 options, Postgres and MySQL, right? Well, they're not embedded, or Postgres and MySQL aren't going to be embedded. That's just, you're going to have that set up and you have to select the backend and tell it like where to go. Okay, cool. No questions on that. So let's go ahead and move to the next one. So now okay, so this is the one that we got a question about in Slack. Pro image is now default. So seamlessly test and adopt pro features without disrupting existing open source functionality. The pro features integrated in the pro image, but remain inactive by default to ensure your experience remains consistent. So this was confusing a little bit to people in Slack. The best description I've heard, and then I'll get Thomas to describe it too, is that the pro image is now the default. It was Alpine before. Now it is a chain guard image. Was it chain guard BusyBox, I think? And that's just the default. So that just means that if you want to use pro features, this enables you to enable those flags. If you don't want to use pro features, don't enable those flags, and it's still the OSS version. It's just a better image than the image that we were using previously. So not a real big difference. The image, the default image that's going to be used when you create a new vCluster after that, it's going to be different. So if you do the CLI conversion, it's going to convert the image from the Alpine image to the Pro image too, I'm sure. And you'll see that in there. That's going to be a difference, like if you do a diff on it. But nothing to be excited or scared over anything like that, because it's just enabling those options if you need them. If you don't need them and you don't need Pro, then it's business as usual, just better image.
Thomas. Yeah, less CVEs when doing scanning with Trivia or other code scanners.
Which I don't know if we have any questions on that. That was the first question that we got in Slack. So I guess not. I guess it's pretty easy to describe. Yeah, just different image, has flags enabled if you want to use the pro features, which in the docs, which I'll show in a few minutes. In the docs, you can see the pro features labeled with the pro next to it. And if you want to use those for any reason, it's a good path to go from open source to the pro if you end up wanting to, because you can use all the open source features. And if you see something in there, you're like, oh, that would be a nice to have, then reach out to us, right? But otherwise, it's going to have all the same features and stuff that we had previously. All right, so fine-tuned ingress and ingress class sync behavior. I think once everyone gets to like this, someone launches vCluster, they get to ingress, they start asking like, how do I actually get into my vCluster? And then it's got to explain SSL pass-through. You got to explain like all these things. So this is actually talking about for the workloads, I think, inside of the vCluster. This isn't talking about the deployment of the vCluster and accessing the API, right? So independent control over ingress syncing to the host and ingress class syncing from the host cluster. These have been decoupled. Can you explain, like, what does that mean beyond, like, obviously these words? Like, what does that mean for the users when they're setting up ingress compared to what they do now?
Yeah, so this enables you to, for example, synchronize only the ingress or only the ingress class, or vice versa. Because sometimes when you want to set up a vCluster and have, let's say, multiple different tenants that you're providing a service to, you also just want to tell them, hey, those are your, let's say, 2 or 3 different ingress classes that you could utilize. Maybe there's a production ingress class that deals with the production certificate setup, or you can have a dev one, or you can have the traffic one instead of an engine X one, because you're experimenting or you're trying to migrate, for example, to traffic. Then you can just make those available in the vCluster. So if somebody does kubectl get ingress classes, they will just see the ingress classes that they can utilize without you having to also synchronize ingress into the vCluster, for example.
And right now you can't, right? Yeah. Like right now in the previous version, you get classes, there's nothing there unless you do extra work to present them.
Yes, okay. And now there's the syncing in there. On the other hand, you can also just specify it so that if you use ingress class, you can have an ingress class in your vCluster set up, because you have some specific controller that you set up, and then you can also have that move into the host cluster. So you can now configure those independent of each other. So maybe you don't want to expose information about the ingress classes to your tenants, and then a default class would apply once it gets synchronized. Or you can just say, hey, those are the 3 ones that you can utilize, and then you have to use one.
Awesome. All right, so we got a question too from Robert. So we don't use ingress or ingress classes. We use glue edge based on Envoy and use virtual services and upstreams. Do we need to do more work because of this? We'll do answer live. Yeah, you got it.
Yes, so it goes in the same direction as with gateway API. Because with the ingress controllers, like with Glue, like with Traffic, like with Istio, etc., all of those implement custom CRDs that are dealing with configuring their ingress behavior. So what you would effectively have to do is you would utilize something like either a generic sync configuration where you can specify what kind of CRDs you want to have synchronized into your host cluster and which fields you would like to have rewritten or rules applied to. Or alternatively, if that is too constraining for you or isn't extensive enough, you can always just fall back to implementing a custom sync or a custom plugin for that vCluster that is then dealing with the behavior from moving the behavior from your vCluster into your host cluster specifically in code.
But say they've already configured this and they're using the plugin for it. Is this going to break anything if they go from 19 to 20?
No. That's not breaking. The configuration file itself is going to be converted into this newer format, but the generic sync syncer, I think, is remaining as is, and it is configured in the same way. So you say, this is my API, this is my group, this is the version, and I want it to be moved like this. I want the name to be written utilizing those rules, and then that will be put into the host cluster that way.
All right, cool. So I'll say, Robert, if you've already got it configured and working, you should be good. If you're looking to do this for the first time, then it may be something that you use like with the generic sync, because the configure, like you're saying, from host to host is still going to only be a subset of, or like the majority of like the base Kubernetes kinds, right? Like the base values, like ingress, secrets, and like that kind of stuff, right? Like anything external or extra or like a different CRD, like I think we get a lot of cross-plane questions or something like this, may take a little bit of work setting up the generic syncer to tell the vCluster what to sync, like Thomas was saying. So hopefully that answered your question, Robert. If you have more questions, let us know. We can keep going on it.
Yeah, I also posted the link to the generic sync in the chat.
Okay, awesome. Thanks, Robert. All right, cool. Let's go. Oh, now we're going to QA. So there's a decent amount of updates. Like the blog post has them on there. I just wanted to go over the ones that we mentioned on the post for the most part to see if anyone had any questions. Is there anything else, Thomas, with the new release that I didn't go over that you would want to like add in there, that or something that you worked on you thought was cool that we didn't touch on?
Oh god, there's so many things. I don't think they're public yet, so
okay, yeah,
I will have to hold back till next month. Hopefully.
Okay, so next month we'll go over even more of the changes that were coming. But I think the main focus with this version is what, just to make it easier for users to get vCluster configured. I think we got feedback on like why is there so many Helm charts, right? Like how, and it was probably harder for us to maintain those Helm charts when we had to update values all the time. This should make it a little bit easier too for people that are doing automation and stuff already. So they just have one chart and then they just put different values and stuff in it based on what the users want, right? That makes it probably easier to template out deploying vClusters for users. Anything else you think this kind of helps out with, or like what kind of use cases it makes easier? Or
I think it makes it more accessible, in my opinion, because now you don't need to know everything by heart. You don't need to guess. You just have this CLI. We can say, just validate the config, and it will tell you if it's valid or not. You can use it in your editor, and it will tell you if the field is correct or not, if it's intended or indented correctly. Because again, we're in YAML land, and if you indent something incorrectly, it won't work. So now you won't get into that situation where you forget the space or two and now suddenly nothing works anymore, not as expected. So that is sort of trying to prevent those issues and make it more user-friendly, more accessible, and also clean up a couple of things that have accumulated throughout the last 19 releases, patch releases, to streamline that entire operation and just make it clearer and also easier to change and reason about. Because with the new docs format, you can just look up the one specific field that you're looking for. There's probably going to be an example how to configure it, and there's also going to be a docs reference. Oh yeah, just that is perfect. So you can just go in there, open the file, and you immediately know what you need to configure, what fields are available, what those fields mean. There's probably an example. So from a working perspective, it becomes more straightforward. And that's one of the things that we were specifically looking for, to make it easier to configure this plethora of options and hidden flags and environment variables and God knows what that existed. To just put it into this one file where it's like, this is our central source of truth when it comes to developing it, and this is also the central source of truth for consumers and for platform teams and engineers utilizing it.
All right, so I got the docs up too, and I'll kind of show what we're talking about with like some of the updates and everything. So, like what you're looking at now is this is going to be more of like what the docs look like for configuration and stuff, right? Like it looks kind of like, I say API, but I mean obviously there's other docs look like this too. But it'll give you a little bit more information on like what to configure, what to set up, more examples. Like I think that's something that we were missing before, is like all the examples to kind of show, okay, this is how you would do it, so that you can kind of learn from there and test it out. So new docs here. I think this is the default docs that show up now too whenever you go. Yes. If you want old docs, you can always go back to the legacy docs. Like if you're using an older version and you want to get back to what was there previously. But yeah, this is kind of example of what the new docs look like. Pretty cool. I think they look better. Obviously, if we get feedback that we want some things to update, we can always update that too. But oh yeah, so I guess I don't know if we want to go into it too much more too. What's the difference between? Do you know what's the difference between vCluster and vCluster platform?
Yeah, so vCluster platform is the platform that is sort of built around vCluster, where you can get a couple more features and more capabilities than just with vCluster itself. And it's I would say, opinionated platform of how you can run it, how you can manage access without having to do all of the legwork yourself. There's also a lot of networking magic happening under the hood that we probably will get to talk in a month. Where all of the things that we're doing can interconnect with each other, where you can have different services talking to different endpoints and different clusters, where you can achieve, let's say, this vCluster, multi-cluster setup that you're looking for.
Okay, awesome. And I think we have another question too. Let me see this real quick. All right, so will more work be done on vCluster CLI? A little bit confusing, Pro versus OSS. There's a Pro sub command, but everything is under there, like login and UI doesn't say it's Pro feature. Yeah, I think, so what happened is the vCluster CLI was originally developed, and then the Pro stuff was just kind of added like on top of that. So I would say that the Pro stuff isn't as built out as the OSS version, and that's probably where some work's going to get done. For the OSS version, I don't know, is there more work? Obviously, there's more work happening on the CLI every day. Is there more focus on making it clear between the two, I guess, or are more things going to fall under the Pro, like vCluster Pro, and then sub commands, or are they kind of going to get built into the base?
So from a CLI perspective, the idea is that we now pull out as much as possible from CLI flags and configurations and just try to streamline it into a very small subset of commands and flags that can be configured from the CLI itself. So you can still configure a distro and what's or not, but the idea is you're not going to have to supply a lot of flags and look up if every flag is a platform flag or an OSS flag or a Pro flag, but you will put everything, all of that, into the file. As you mentioned with the login and logout and what's or not commands, those have been added into the CLI later on, I think after version 0.16, 0.17, something like that, to integrate it with the platform that is vCluster platform. But that often itself will probably just get a tag at the beginning of the command that it's a platform or Pro subcommand that is going to be utilized, and that often in itself will only be compatible with either the platform or with the vCluster Pro that is running.
Yeah. All right. So any other? All right. See if we got any other questions. I wanted to okay, here we go. Any plans to work on random integration from the vCluster project side? So you're talking about the open source side for integrations. Not sure. Let me answer live.
Yeah, that's a question that I don't think I can even answer because I don't know from the strategic point. All I can say is how it's implemented technically. If there is interest from the community, then it would make sense to somehow vocalize that. But from what I know, that's for now, it's probably going to stick with the platform.
Feedback. The thing being that's a way for you to basically put a button in Rancher that you can click, and it'll take you to the vCluster UI and create a virtual cluster, and then it'll like sync users and stuff like that too. But touching on that, if you go look at the vCluster Pro pricing now, there is a new tier. So if you want to try the platform is the UI, right? the platform kind of shows the UI. So if you want to try the UI, go check out our pricing and look at the base tier. You can get a free trial, and then you can use it for a certain amount of users and stuff for a decent amount of time. So if you want to see what the UI looks like, try that out. There's a good tier on there that you could try out and mess around with and see if it actually has a feature set that you want. And then I don't know if I don't think Rancher integration is part of that tier. I think it's like more the enterprise, but at least I'll give you like the UI I'd like to test out. All right. So do you have any other questions or things about like the new release or other things that are getting added in? Like if you have questions about like, hey, I'd like to see this feature get added in, we can get the feedback here. Also, I mean, it's better to have it on GitHub, right? It's better to have it on GitHub as a feature request so more people can like comment on stuff too. But I can always give feedback to our product manager too if we have like questions that are like, hey, where's this feature? I don't think we've heard the hey, is Rancher coming to the open source version yet, or some of the other stuff. Yeah, if you have questions about it, let me know. So I guess it's kind of the end of the QA. Ask more questions before we wrap up too if you have them. Thank you for the ones that you asked previously. But I guess how do you get involved or ask questions? So like I said, check out GitHub. Here's a link here. Slack, the docs are now updated and you can see us there. Yep. Thank you, Hannah. And then here's all our social stuff. So this video will get posted. So I'll post this video sometime today after I edit it to our YouTube channel. So if you want to go back and listen to any of Thomas's descriptions or answers, then you can do there. If you want to link it to someone else, and they can kind of hear what he's talking about for like the updates, you can go there too. But that's pretty much. Thank you. Let me see if I can think of any other questions too. We're kind of we went a little bit faster than I thought we were gonna go. We usually around like 9:40, 9:45. Base stuff for Thomas, like developing it. So if someone wants to come contributed, I guess they could work on the feature if they wanted to for like Rancher or something like that. But what was your favorite thing about the new release that you worked on that you want to talk about while we wait to see if anyone has any more questions and kind of do like an outro?
So there are things working here, working there, working in between. I think the one that I liked the most, or reviewing the most, or giving my input the most is around the validation part, because that, in my opinion, can save a lot of things. Also validating that you don't accidentally switch distros, which could have devastating effects in like the previous versions where your data might have gotten lost, your deployments and what's not. So those are things where I think it's both a quality of life improvement that's nice to have, but also cool from the point that you don't accidentally mess up, because accidentally messing up and deleting the production database probably happened to everyone at some point. Yeah, but now there's like this check in place that's going to tell you, hey, you probably shouldn't delete production. So that's probably one of the coolest things that I've seen with this release that I'm excited about.
So is it just like a plugin, like on VS Code, like I would search for vCluster and install it just like I would for something like, or like if I'm working on it, is it going to recognize it and tell me to install it like with Go does and other stuff?
Yeah, so the way it's going to work with the JSON schema is we have submitted a pull request to the JSON schema registry, or JSON schema store, I think. And that is going to point to the vCluster repo, and that is going to contain the schema file, so that when you open up VS Code and you have your vCluster.yaml file open, and you have the YAML extension installed by Red Hat, or if you're a new Vim and you have the JSON schema extension installed, that will just automatically recognize that it's a vCluster.yaml file, and then it will just pull in the schema from the repo, and you do not need to configure anything anymore.
Gotcha. Looks like we got a hand raised. Hakan, if you want to type the question there, we can answer it for you. Oh, we've got. I'm not sure. I don't know, Hannah, if we can enable like voice to ask the question, or chat. It's easier with like the text because I can like, kind of read it out loud. Oh, here we go. I think they can. Yeah. I think we'll just wait for chat. I don't know if they're gonna unmute or anything like that. Yeah, there we go. All right, cool. I guess that's pretty much what we wanted to get into. If you do have other questions too, and you want to ask them, you can either ask them like in the vCluster channel in Slack, or reach out to me. I'm on Slack too for the Loft users at Peterson, and then I can try to get the information for you. But I think that's pretty much it. Thank you for joining. We'll probably next month, probably into the next month, we'll have another one, and then maybe we'll talk about some of the changes that are coming up in the next month with Thomas. But if you want to have us cover anything specific or anything, just let us know in chat. Just reach out to me on like I said, Slack and say, hey, I want to see this. Because eventually, after we've got these updates and stuff, we'll probably start showing some demos. Maybe you could show off something that's newer that's in the beta that is pretty cool, so users can kind of see how to use it. Maybe they haven't used it before. But that's pretty much it. Thank you, Thomas, for your time. Anything you want to, any parting words or anything you want to say before we head out?
Yeah, I think regarding the beta, just a call for review, however you want to say it.
Okay.
For people to just try it out, to give us their opinions, tell the things that they like, they don't like, if they don't like the structure in general. Because right now is probably the best time to change those things, given that we're already changing a lot of things, which could be harder in the future going on. So now is probably the best time to test drive it and give your opinion, create a pull request, go into Slack, tell us what you like, what you don't like.
Yell at us about bugs.
Yes.
Great bug reports and stuff for us too.
And ping Mike all whenever you have an issue. He likes that a lot. Yeah.
Yeah. Ping me when you have an issue, and I'll see if I can figure it out. I might not be able to. I'm not the most technical person here, but I can at least help try troubleshoot or figure out. All right. Thank you so much, everybody. Oh, there's my AirPod. We'll see y'all next month, and we'll get that posted in the next couple of weeks of when the next one is, and the information about it. All right. Bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.